promote a long-term vision for protecting our scarce water resources. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purposes, the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, California has been plagued by litigation and regulation, delay and obfuscation on its water policy, and we are now living with the result of that. The gentleman offers us an amendment that's more of the same. In fact, in this case, delaying the bill until the federal government measures the water content of clouds. Enough is enough. It is a time now for action, and this bill calls for action. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Nunez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment is another stall tactic. There's been several speakers who have talked about how this bill creates no water. Well, I hate to break it to people, but bills don't create water. It rains. That's why the founding fathers of our state, including Franklin Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy, 2 United States presidents, worked with the leadership of California to develop a system that could keep water for 5 years, so we could withhold 5 years of drought. I hate to have to use this, but this is how it works. Mr. Chairman, the sun melts the snow. The snow gets stored in the reservoirs. In this case, this is Yosemite, where San Francisco gets all of its water. Then the water runs out. That's how it works. That's how the system was designed to work. If you don't understand this chart, I have another chart. Once again, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, because this one is a little basic, but sun. Sun creates heat. Heat melts ice. Ice becomes water. Water we use to drink and irrigate our crops. That's how this works. Government doesn't create water. Government can only help to create the infrastructure to hold the water in an area that's like California that is always in a drought. So our friends from the coastal areas of California like to have it both ways. They like to drink their water from the Sierra Nevadas, pipe it over so that it never has to go into the delta. At the same time, they dump their sewage into the delta that kills the fish. So this bill is not designed to make it rain. Nobody can do that. We don't need to measure clouds. This bill is designed to get the water that we have in the wet years and hold it for the dry years. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from California yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we've come to some agreement that the government can't create water, and that's productive. I guess what I would say is that we're at 12% of snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, which has functioned as our water storage, and it's not there. And what I would say is that over decades, the state and the federal government and the cities and agencies within California have worked to deal with a framework for addressing this kind of situation, and the bill, as it's constituted, would change that. All my amendment does is give some assurance to communities that in the event that there are water transfers, that their particular water budgets would not be affected. I think it's a reasonable assurance to give. I think the author of the bill might suggest it's already there. If it is, let's codify it and we'll make the bill much better, provide that assurance to cities and counties and agencies and the state that's worked so hard to develop a framework for dealing with this very situation. I reserve.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, reserves. The gentleman from California,
we're ready
Mr.
to close when the gentleman from California is.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, is recognized.
I yield back, Mr.
15
Chairman.
seconds. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, is recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to yield the balance of our time to the author of the measure, Mr. Valadao from California.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Valadao, is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're coming to an end here, and this bill is about to get voted on. What we've got going on here, and we've all figured it out from all the colorful presentations and all the pictures on both sides, we are in a drought. We know that. We can't make it rain. We also know that. But we also know that over the years, our forefathers invested to make sure that we can alleviate the pain of what we're going through today. And we did not use that the way we were supposed to. And this is the third time this graph's coming up, but I think it's important. All the different years that we've gone through a drought, we've had decent allocations. And the green here is the allocation for 2013, a 20%. Yet we had all this water in storage. What happened to this water? When everybody talks about how their communities are running out of water, this water should have been going to those districts, should have been going to those homes. Kids, parents, families, farmers, this water should have been going to you to grow crops, to feed families. This is important. That's the most important part about this. We had a lot of water. We lost it all. It was dumped out into the ocean in the name of a fish. And I know in this body, thankfully, that, gentlemen, yes, I'll yield.
We're going back and forth with a lot of numbers here, and thank you for yielding. There's something we need to understand. The allocation is a number that is taken from the nature of the that the water year is supposed to be. That is the early allocation.
Okay.
Actually,
I reclaim my time.
in 2013, there was 2 million.
I reclaim my time.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Valdeo, controls the
We
time.
are limited on our time. So the most important thing, what I've noticed over time with the studies and the reports are that the food prices do not affect the people in this room. We all know from all the news articles, at least half the people in this room, money is no issue to you. But for the average person sitting at home watching today, this has a direct impact on you at home and has a direct impact on you at your grocery store grocery bill. So this is an important piece of legislation, and I'd love to see some other ideas that can actually deliver some water. Not more ideas that take water from the valley and send it out to the ocean. We've seen that, we've done that, and we've survived on that. But we need to come up with some actual ideas that help protect water for our futures, for our communities in Southern California like the author would like to see. So thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I
Gentleman from
ask for a
California,
recorded
Mr.
vote.
Peters.
Thank you.
Gentleman requests a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1 by Mrs. Napolitano of California. Amendment number 2 by Ms. Matsui of California. Amendment number 3 by Mr. Berra of California. Amendment number 4 by Mrs. Capps of California. Amendment number 6 by Mr. Huffman of California. Amendment number 7 by Mr. McNerney of California. Amendment number 8 by Mr. Peters of California. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Napolitano, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Mrs. Napolitano of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
A series of votes on amendments leading up to a final passage vote on a bill that would change water allocations in California's Central Valley. A headline in the San Jose Mercury News: California drought. House water bill exposes deep partisan divide. The story says the House is expected to pass a water bill Wednesday that Republicans call a necessity for drought-stricken California, but which Democrats label a water grab and political power play that undermines years of delicate negotiations. The story says that the bill, which opponents say would give more water to farmers at the expense of the environment, is probably dead on arrival in the Democrat-controlled Senate, where both of California's senators oppose it. But the bill, which has drawn scathing criticism from Governor Jerry Brown, highlights a deepening partisan divide over solving the Golden State's water woes, now and for decades to come. That in the San Jose Mercury News. This amendment, offered by Representative Napolitano, a California Democrat, would require changes for all delivered water to include interest. Senate Democrats and Republicans have spent much of the day away from the Capitol at their annual issue retreats. But CQ reports that Democrats remain busy to try to strike another deal on renewing unemployment benefits, this time by offering to pay the cost through a accounting technique known as pension smoothing. Here's more about what happened at the retreat today.
Well, senators had the day off for their annual policy retreat, and Burgess Everett with Politico as a congressional reporter. I guess being a congressional reporter means covering these retreats. First, the Democrats, Senate Democrats, who were at Nationals Park in Washington hearing from President Obama and former President Bill Clinton. What's the significance of the timing of their hearing from President Obama?
Well, it's significant because in some ways Senate Democrats have been breaking from the president on certain issues, and some of that's related to the 2014 elections and Democrats running in states where the president isn't particularly popular, like Louisiana and Arkansas. But it's also kind of at a big moment, I guess, for legislation in the Senate. Unemployment insurance still has not been revived. That expired on December 28th. They're preparing to go forward with a minimum wage increase. So I think they're trying to just kind of strategize as a party, whereas in the past I feel like congressional aides have been a little bit critical of the coordination between the White House and the Democrats.
I understand there's not a whole lot of media coverage coming out of these retreats, but Bill Clinton, what's his purpose in being there? Just as a cheerleader for the agenda?
Yeah, I've been told, by some sources who are familiar with what's going on at the meetings that they don't expect any big policy news or political news out of President Clinton's visit. It's more of a, get riled up. We're going to hold the Senate. We're going to all be on the same page. We're on the Democratic team. So I would look at it as more of a team-building exercise right now.
Democrats go to the ballpark. Republicans go to the Library of Congress for their retreat. What was the focus of their meeting?
They are going to kind of get on the same page in terms of getting their agenda out there rather than just be opposing the Democrats' agenda. I think there's been a recognition that they're being seen as an opposition party more than the party of ideas that they want to present themselves as. So I think they're going to kind of be looking at how can we offer alternatives to, for example, raising the minimum wage, or how can we offer alternatives towards extending unemployment benefits indefinitely. It's going to be sort of those ideas.
Well, the House is holding down the legislative fort on Capitol Hill. Today, the House Budget Committee hearing from Doug Elmendorf, the Congressional Budget Office Director. You tweeted about that, saying in your tweet that House Republican members have been given a 5-point bullet list of CBO talking points for the day, the first of which is about those 2.5 million jobs. So tell us about some of the fallout or that messaging coming out of the CBO hearing today.
You're lucky the Senate's out so that I was in the House to get that little tidbit today. The member who told me about this obviously didn't give them to me, but said that the primary one was the 2.5 million jobs that will be lost due to the effect of Obamacare. And the administration and Democrats' talking point pushback to that is that it's because low-income Americans won't feel as obligated to juggle so many jobs, so many working hours. They can have a more comfortable lifestyle with these insurance subsidies that they wouldn't have had without it.
And going back to the Senate as we wrap up, you mentioned earlier the unemployment insurance, that issue coming back on the Senate floor Thursday. What's proposed?
Well, the Democrats have a 3-month extension that's paid for with this changes to federal pension law called smoothing. It looks like that may not get 60 votes. What may be able to get that passed, however, is maybe sort of a wink and a nod agreement with Republicans to repeal cost of living adjustments as part of the budget deal that negatively impacted veterans. So there may be some interplay between those two things. Right now they're scheduled to take a vote on Thursday at 11 a.m., but there may be a deal in the works to have more votes on amendments because Republicans want to have votes on their proposals and their alternatives to unemployment insurance extensions.
Burgess Everett, Politico's congressional reporter. You can read more at Politico.com and follow his reporting on Twitter at BurgessEV. Thanks for the update.
Thank you very much.
CQ has some details of what's expected in the Senate tomorrow when the chamber gavels in after the retreat. Senate Democrats' latest gambit to renew unemployment insurance benefits is a proposed 3-month extension with the new offset that would provide flexibility for companies to reduce deductible corporate pension fund contributions. A procedural vote to advance the bill is expected tomorrow. Wanted to also give you a few lines from a Politico story. At a House GOP leadership meeting this morning, top Republicans privately acknowledged that they cannot pass a debt limit bill with language that would tweak Obamacare or mandate construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline, according to aides. They won't even try to put those bills on the floor, senior aides said. Speaker John Boehner wants to bring a bill to the floor next week to raise the nation's borrowing limit, but there's no concrete sense of how to attract the support of 217 Republicans. The vast majority of Democrats will only vote for a clean debt ceiling bill without extraneous policy attached. That in Politico. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew says the Treasury will run short on cash to pay the nation's bills at the end of the month. Members in the House continuing to vote on an amendment to a California water bill. Here's some of the debate on that issue from today.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings, pending which I will yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for purpose of debate only, and I ask that all members have 5 legislative days during which they may revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
The resolution provides a structured rule for consideration of 2 separate bills, H.R. 2954, which is the Public Access and Lands Improvement Act, and H.R. 3964, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Valley Emergency Water Delivery Act. It provides for an hour of general debate, each measure equally divided and controlled by the chairman and ranking member of the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule makes in order 5 amendments to H.R. 2954 and 8 to H.R. 3964, and of those amendments, made in order 9 are Democrat amendments. So this is a fair, it is a generous rule. It will provide for a balanced and open debate on the merits of both of these important pieces of legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman, my friend from Utah, Mr. Bishop, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we have real problems facing our nation. The measures before us today are partisan and have no chance of becoming law. My friends across the aisle would rather pick political battles than propose real solutions. We worked together on the Farm Bill, the budget, and the Omnibus Appropriations Bill, and I hope that soon we will pass our bipartisan Water Resources Development Act, our conference report. Instead of continuing in a bipartisan manner, however, we are here once again considering a partisan bill that will not become law. For example, H.R. 3964 is a far-reaching measure of drastic and immediate consequences for its chosen winners. Yet the bill was introduced only a week ago and with only Republican co-sponsors. California is in the middle of a terrible drought. Some Californians are already reporting that no water comes out when they turn on their taps. They need a real solution. We've got our water issues in Florida. There's not enough of it in places that need it and too much of it where it is not needed. Yet my friends across the aisle have decided to handpick when states' rights don't matter and take the opportunity to blast California's prerogative. California has a plan, the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, that's been worked on in a unanimously important way. Instead, this legislation has turned a legitimate crisis into a justification for a power grab, prioritizing junior water rights holders over those with senior rights. I respect my colleagues from California, but the governor is responsible for the entire state, and he expressly rejects the measure before us today. Mr. Speaker, Californians already have, as I've said, a water use plan in place. The plan is the result of long, detailed discussions and carefully crafted policy. Yet this bill would substitute, indeed preempt, the will of the people with a reactionary federal policy. Specifically, the bill preempts California law, eliminates Endangered Species Act protections for salmon and other fisheries, overturns existing federal law, as well as undermines existing agreements and court orders related to water use in California. Moreover, this bill will not fix the problem, which is simple. There is not enough water. H.R. 3964 will not end the drought. It will not create more water. Simply put, it will only decide who will go thirsty. California's Secretary for Natural Resources, John Laird, wrote to the relevant committees, "The bill," and I quote him, "falsely holds the promise of water relief that cannot be delivered because in this drought the water simply does not exist." End of quote. How and when to direct water is very similar to problems we face in the Everglades. Without an ongoing flush of water into the ocean, salt water, seawater, intrudes upon the delta. You then wind up with salt water inland, and then you might as well not have any water at all. I didn't have to deliberate long to decide against this bill. California, the state the bill supposedly helps, is strongly opposed to it. And let me be very clear, that means the governor and those who are critical to it are opposed. I understand that there are members of the California delegation that do support this matter, and I respect that. I can't say it any better myself. The only way we're going to help California is to realize that you can't play politics with a person's drinking water. Turning now to the other piece of legislation, H.R. 2954 is no better either substantively or procedurally. My friends across the aisle continue to play fast and loose with their pledge to address one issue at a time. That's what they said. H.R. 2954 is 10 unrelated bills stitched together. Some of the provisions we are looking at today are not controversial, but rather than pass non-controversial provisions through less contentious means, my friends have packaged them together with partisan measures for rank political purposes. It's Frankenstein's parliamentary monster. The other day at the Rules Committee, my friends across the aisle talked about how much they love national parks and shared their experiences hiking and visiting the parks with their families. Yet they're still bringing H.R. 2954 to the floor, a bill that would greatly hamstring the National Park Service Bureau of Land Management and the United States Forest Service in their capabilities to protect public land and endangered species. These 10 bills are designed to influence or dictate management decisions about the conveyance or disposal of federal lands. They tie the hands of public land managers and give away millions of dollars worth of federal land to local governments without ensuring the land is used in the public's best interest. They include drastic changes to regulations related to grazing policy and waive or undermine existing environmental laws. Some of these provisions would be significantly less controversial were it not for the unnecessary provisions waiving environmental protections. It's no secret my friends across the aisle look to undermine, if not eliminate, the National Environmental Policy Act at every chance that they can obtain. These are the kinds of policies that leave 300,000 West Virginians without water to drink or bathe. We don't know the effects of the chemicals that spilled into the drinking water for 300,000 West Virginians. We don't know yet how much or even specifically what was spilled. The lasting damage to West Virginia's water supply can't be predicted. That is why it should be an exemplar for us to carefully have environmental regulations everywhere. Mr. Speaker, week after week, my Republican colleagues continue to bring up partisan bills that offer no relief to hardworking Americans. I believe that this institution is better than that and must change course. I'm astounded that we haven't authorized unemployment insurance. Let me repeat that. I am astounded that we have not reauthorized unemployment insurance for now what is 1.6 million Americans. With each passing day, more families face the threat of losing their homes. With each passing day, our roads, our bridges, our schools, our parks, our ports, our airports and railways continue to degrade due to lack of adequate investments. And with each passing day, Americans burdened by long-term unemployment see little, if no, action in the House of Representatives to give them hope. With so many Americans and their families enduring difficult times, we cannot afford to wait any longer. Americans deserve peace of mind and a government that functions. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Utah.
My good friend from Florida was correct in at least one aspect. There are two bills that are involved in this particular rule. One which involves 10 different sections dealing with land issues that are critical to 10 states, chagrined that they have to come to Congress for redress of their grievances. The other one deals with the water issue, and to explain that water issue, I wish to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from California who is the sponsor of that particular bill.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a farmer in the Central Valley, I grew up there, born and raised on my own personal farm with my family. And we've struggled with this water fight for years, even before I was born. This isn't a new issue. It's something that's been talked about for years. The problem is we've talked about it long enough. We've got to do something. We've got to make a difference for these people. We've got people in our district, when they talk about unemployment benefits, these people would rather have a job. You turn on that water and they'll be back to work. We've got farmers in my district that are literally laying people off today, putting more people in the unemployment lines because of environmental regulations. And yes, there is a drought going on. That's been going on. It's happened in the past. We've got at least 10 in our recorded history in California. But when you look at what our forefathers have done, they created an infrastructure to allow us to prepare for those droughts. And what these regulations have done is allowed water to go out into the ocean and not be in place to prevent us from this disastrous situation we face today. That's what we're fighting over today. We want to make sure that that infrastructure is used and our taxpayer money is used or put in place so that when those projects are there, we have water to supply our farms, supply our communities. Over the last year, as a member of Congress, and the 2 years before that as a member of the State House, and before that as a farmer, I've always dealt with and talked with my locals, and especially my local electeds, my city councils, my city managers, my board of supervisors, all come to me with the same issue. What are we going to do? We've got 40% water this year for our city. We've got 50% of our water for our city. We've got 20% of the water for our farmers. How are we going to take care of our communities? How are we going to take care of these people? How are we going to allow them to be successful? And this is one of the solutions. When we talk about solutions, I'm fine and I'm happy to work with members on long-term solutions like the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, as long as it delivers water. I'm fine talking about the water bond, as long as it delivers water infrastructure for our valley. But we have to make sure that the crisis that we're facing today is addressed, because it is a crisis. It is affecting people today. We are seeing people being laid off. Yes, that is putting a huge dent in our resources, because we have to pay these people because they're not working, because of a program, because of regulation that were put in place that allowed that water to go out into the ocean for absolutely no good reason. So this has had an impact on my district. We're going to continue to fight, and yes, this is a solution. If the other side has a solution to bring to the table and be part of the conversation, I'm happy to hear it and happy to negotiate. But until then, we're going to continue to fight on our side and push this forward. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased at this time to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlewoman from California, former member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Matsui.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to thank the gentleman from Florida for yielding me time. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 3964. California is currently experiencing a record drought. Up until just last Thursday, it had been 54 days without rain in my district of Sacramento. That's almost 2 months. To put this in context, Sacramento is experiencing a 130-year record for low rainfall, a record that dates back to 1884. With 2013 being the driest year on record since the gold rush, and 2014 being the third year of a drought cycle, we are being pushed to make do with less water than ever before. A statewide drought emergency has been declared, and my district of Sacramento is doing its part by instituting a mandatory reduction in water use. My constituents are required by law now to reduce their water use 20 to 30%. Fines for multiple offenders will reach $1,000. Moreover, in the Sacramento region, the Folsom Reservoir is at dangerously low levels and is currently at only 17% of capacity. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet to solving California's water issues. The issue of water in California has been debated for so many decades because it is such a critical issue for the state. As a daughter of a Central Valley farmer who grew up on a farm, I deeply understand the value of and the controversy over water. In Northern California, we've done our best to balance our watershed to provide water for our farms, our cities, and habitat. To say this bill will help the drought is grossly misleading and frankly irresponsible. Mr. Speaker, even if we pumped as much water south as possible, it still wouldn't be enough. The problem is a lack of rain. There is simply no more water to pump from the Delta. Mr. Speaker, instead of working together, this bill further divides our state. My district, the City of Sacramento, the Sacramento region, and Northern California as a whole strongly opposes this bill. Some of the concerns include the loss of the state's right to manage its own water, the decimation of environmental protections for Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, the ability to manage Folsom Reservoir for the benefit of the Sacramento metropolitan area, and most importantly, the overall instability that this bill would create in California. We cannot afford to give up California's right to control its own water future. The stakes are much too high. I urge my colleagues to strongly oppose this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Utah? Reserves. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida?
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased at this time to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from California, a member of Energy and Commerce's Committee, Mr. McInerney.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to start by stating that I'm strongly opposed to H.R. 3964 for a variety of reasons, but primarily because it does nothing to address California's drought. However, I'd like to raise 2 points about the bill's process and debate. I offered an amendment that would sunset provisions of this bill in the 2015 water year. I did this because the bill's authors stated that the bill's intended to be a short-term measure. And yet my amendment to limit the duration of the bill was prevented from coming to the floor for debate. I offered another amendment, which was actually proposed by the bill's authors. A few weeks ago, the Speaker, the Majority Whip, and the bill's authors held a press conference in California where they bemoaned the fact that the Senate would not come to the negotiating table to address long-term water shortage issues. I agree with them that a bipartisan discussion in both houses of Congress is appropriate, and that's why I offered an amendment using their own suggestions to establish a joint select committee to address drought issues in the West. It would be comprised of 10 members, just as the bill's author recommended, and would work out a comprehensive solution. That proposal, too, was rejected, as was a similar amendment by my California Valley colleague, Mr. Costa. We wanted to bring the House and the Senate to the table, but are being denied the tools that we need to do just that. How can the bill's authors claim they want a bicameral discussion, yet deny a vote on this issue, one which they just advocated for? I'm trying to establish a set of guidelines with which the bill's authors say they want, but they won't even allow it. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
Appreciate the gentleman's frustration. Those very proposals were offered by Chairman Lucas in the Farm Bill and rejected by the Senate. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlewoman from California, with whom I served previously on the Intelligence Committee and as a member of the Energy and Resources Commerce Committee, Ms. Escher.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the Speaker. I rise in fierce opposition to the bill that's being considered because it throws decades of state and federal water law out the window. And in the process, it would kill thousands of jobs in the Bay Area and elsewhere on the West Coast, and it pits water users one against the other. Salmon fishing is one of California's oldest industries. Today, the Bay Delta salmon fishery is not nearly as healthy as it once was, but it still supports thousands of jobs up and down the entire West Coast. This bill would dry up what's left of the once legendary salmon fishery industry. Here are some of the
The nays are 239. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Ms. Matsui of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Amendment voting continues on the California water bill. Already today, the House approved a bill that would promote hunting and fishing on public lands. CVS, the nation's second-largest drugstore chain, said today that it'll phase out selling cigarettes, cigars, and chewing tobacco by October 1st in its 7,600 stores nationwide. The Associated Press writes that the move will help grow its business with doctors, hospitals, and others to improve customers' health. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid releasing a statement about that, reading in part, "This decision by CVS also sends a powerful message that the profit from the sale of cigarettes does not outweigh its harmful addictive effects." This amendment offered by Representative Doris Matsui of California.
193. The nays are 228. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Berra, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Mr. Berra of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment would require the California water bill to not have a harmful effect on the quality, quantity, or safety of drinking water for area residents. In addition to our live coverage of the House tomorrow, on C-SPAN 2 we'll have the National Prayer Breakfast in the morning at 8 Eastern, with the Senate coming in at 9:30. And then on C-SPAN 3, Politico will hold an event on energy policy in Congress starting at 8:10 a.m. Eastern. And the House Oversight Subcommittee will meet about the IRS investigation at 9:30. You can join the conversation at that event on Facebook and Twitter.
Vote, the yeas are 194, the nays are 226. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Capps, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Mrs. Capps of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment offered by California Democrat Lois Capps. We mentioned that after the annual party retreats, the Senate is coming back in tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern, working on an unemployment extension bill. Congressional Quarterly writes that a new proposal would combine a short-term extension costing an estimated $6.4 billion with a pension smoothing proposal that allows companies to reduce contributions to pension funds in the near term while raising future commitments. The story says that most Republicans back the idea of extending aid, but want to pay for it through changes to the health care overhaul and a broadening of the sequester for some mandatory spending. There are 3 more amendment votes after this one in the House.
Vote, the yeas are 194, the nays are 227. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Mr. Huffman of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote. Vote, the yeas are 189, the nays are 231. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 7, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 7, printed in Part B of House Report Number 113-340, offered by Mr. McNerney of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the requested for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is in order. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Members voting now on an amendment that would prevent the California water bill from taking effect until it's determined that it will not harm water quality or water availability for agricultural producers in California's Delta region. A couple of headlines in the Associated Press. Conservative Republicans today ruled out any immigration legislation in the House this year, insisting that the GOP should wait until next year when the party might also control the Senate. The story says that House GOP leaders unveiled their broad immigration principles last week. Immigration legislation is one of the top priorities for President Obama's second term. And also, former American Idol and Celebrity Apprentice runner-up Clay Aiken is running for Congress in North Carolina. Aiken announced that he would seek the Democratic nomination for the 2nd Congressional District, currently held by Republican Representative Ray Elmers.
On this vote, the yeas are 193, the nays are 230. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 8, printed in Part B of House Report 113-340 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 8, printed in Part B of House Report Number 113-340, offered by Mr. Peters of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is in order. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is the last amendment vote in this series, offered by Congressman Scott Peters. The National Journal writes, well, it looks like House Republicans are back to the drawing board over what to do about the debt limit. House leadership has pulled the plug on proposals that would tie raising the debt ceiling to approval of the Keystone Oil Pipeline or eliminating the so-called risk corridors in the Affordable Care Act, because neither plan could reach 218 votes. Republicans may seek other priorities in exchange for raising the debt limit, but no clear strategy has emerged. The debt limit has been suspended through Friday, and the Treasury Department estimates it can take enough extraordinary measures to last through the end of the month before risking default. Here's what we expect in the House over the next 10 minutes, a debate on whether to change the California water bill, then a procedural vote, and a vote on final passage of the measure.
On this vote, the yeas are 192, the nays are 231. The amendment is not adopted. The question is on the amendment in the nature of a substitute as amended. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no.